What is going on, guys? This is Gene Jensen, and it is time for another Friday Night Live. What is up? What is up? How's everybody doing? Hey, Barry Bennett, saw you got on here a little bit early. What's going on, man? Whoo! We'll let people jump on here, kind of introduce yourselves, and let's have a good old time. I scarfed down dinner fast tonight, so may have some digestion issues, but who cares? What's up, John Goss? Elizabeth, how you doing? Old twisted goat. And it's your first Friday Night Live. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. We're just gonna hang out here and have a little bit of fun. Talk a little bit about early summer fishing, how the fish are migrating, and what they're doing right now. At least when the temperatures get to where they're at right now here in Georgia. And we'll talk about temperatures so you guys that live other places can kind of get an idea of what to look for in the next couple, 2 or 3 weeks. But if you guys are joining me on my podcast, welcome. You guys that don't know, I take the recording of this show, put it on my podcast, Fishing with Fluke Master, and let you guys, the guys who don't get a chance to listen to it. I got a lot of truckers and stuff to listen to this, so welcome. Patrick, we'll talk about Alumacraft here in just a second. Actually, we can talk about it right now. Alumacraft, during COVID, they made some business choices that I don't particularly agree with, and it caused them to not be able to make welded boats anymore. So I'm still part of their pro staff, but I don't have a boat. They don't make the boat that I would use, and they don't make a boat I could sell. So I just basically told them, I said, let's just wait and see what happens. So I'm not saying they'll never make welded boats again. I'm just saying that they suspended production of welded boats, 3 years ago, something like that. So, but yeah, it sucks, but I'm still loyal to them because they saved my business years ago. So definitely good dudes. What's going on, everybody? Oh, Chris Lanky, welcome, man. Welcome to your first Friday Night Live. Twisted Goat, this is his first one from Lake Hartwell. That's awesome. Banks and Eddies, what's up, man? Flyer, I haven't seen you before unless you changed your avatar. That's pretty good. Welcome from Arkansas. Man, sweet. A lot of guys that just finally made it to a Friday Night Live. That's great. Must not be anything going on tonight. You know, I started doing these Friday Night Lives, 5 years ago? When YouTube first allowed us to do lives, I was doing these things. And I did them because Friday is the worst day of the week to launch a video. So I wanted to fill in a gap. And I'm like, let's just do a live and see how they go. And it's amazing what they've become. Of course, I had to put it down for a year last year and not do them because what was going on was YouTube was taking the video and basically putting it on my channel as just a regular video. And then the guys would come in to watch it and, see that it was an hour-long live deal, and they just click off of it. And my watch time went to crap, which screwed up the algorithms. And I'm not the only one. Everybody that was doing lives, this was what it was doing to it. So they had to change that. And once I got word that they had changed to how they sort that video, I went back to doing it. But it did take them a while to figure that out. So sweet. Let's see. What else is going on? I had my first guide trip yesterday for my new kayak guiding service. If you guys haven't seen it, it's there's a trophy lake 15 minutes down the road from my house, and it's called Heath Lake. It's part of Rocky Mountain Public Fishing Area here in Georgia, and I had a guy, Keith, come on there book a trip with me. We had a good time. I hope I taught him a ton because we went through his electronics. I talked about fish migration. I talked about, what I look for, like water clarity. We went through the whole gamut. He caught a couple of really good fish. My focus wasn't so much in trying to get him as many fish as we could. I wanted to try to get him his personal best though, but he came close. But we definitely had a good time. But if you guys were interested in booking a trip, just go to Fishing Chaos, the app, or you can go online to fishingchaos.com and find me under their charter page. Just search for Fluke Master. And I guide the 1st through the 10th of each month, but not on Sunday. And that's because they're only open the 1st through the 10th. That's why it's a trophy lake. It gets a lot of pressure during those 10 days, but then there's 20 days it doesn't get pressure. So it's pretty cool. So welcome everybody. Anthony Guerrero, welcome. Bunch of guys from Facebook. That's awesome. Hello from Pennsylvania. What's up, Scott? Moose Dihon, first time sitting in as well. Gosh, somebody is a bunch of first timers. Good. We're going to have a good time tonight. And those of you who are here the first time, what we do, I always wait to the last minute to even think about Friday Night Live because I have a whole bunch going on during the week. And so I don't get a chance to get any guests or anything lined up, but I will eventually when things kind of settle down. But we sit down, we do some Q&As, and you guys can ask whatever questions you want to about fishing, and we will, of course, not religion and politics, all that other crap. But anyway, so ask whatever question, and I try to answer them as best as I can. So Jeffrey Wise says, totally appreciate your channel. I'm very new to this. Want to learn more about fishing with finesse. That's awesome, man. Oh, one more thing before we get rock and roll with the Q&A. If you also go to Fishing Chaos, go under the KBF page, the Kayak Bass Fishing page, and look for the Knucklehead series. I'm on my last month, and it's $15 to enter. It's a month long. Wherever you live, you can fish this thing, and the winner qualifies to be on my fishing team for the championship in October. So there's 3 guys that have already qualified, and matter of fact, who qualified this last month? And then there's one more, and then that'll be a team of 5 in October, and we'll help you get to Alabama in October to fish a championship. I think from the money that I raise, I'm going to get a really nice Airbnb for everybody to stay at. So, but hold on just a second. Let me look real quick and see who won last month. That was one of the things on my to-do list that I forgot to do. Let's see. There's a whole bunch of YouTubers doing them too. So March, April, May. Where's May? Oh, Damon Henderson won. Good grief. That's one of my best friends. Awesome, brother. He won with 111.5 inches. So good grief. That ain't right. We're going to have a whole lot of fun, though. It's going to have a whole lot of fun. If it's at Gunnersville, we might just stay at his Airbnb. Awesome. Okay, let's do some Q&A. Casper, thanks for the $20. He says, get yourself a jackhammer. He donated $20 through a super chat. That's awesome, man. Last thing I need is a jackhammer. Golly, I don't even want to talk about how many of them I have. That's crazy. All right, let's get into some Q&A. Run through here. There was one we talked about Illumicraft. Brian Pennington, I've never been to Lake DeGray. Have not. Cash Henderson, he talks about any tips on Caddo Lake. Water temp is 82. Water is dirty. So Caddo Lake is a swamp lake. It's got nothing but soft bottom and tree stumps. I would start out in the deeper cypress trees and try those. I know in the fall they'll get into the bluegill beds. You can catch them, fishing the bluegill beds. They're there just because the bluegill beds are the hardest bottom in the area. But they should, with the temperatures being 82, they should be out in the current and in the grass and in the around the stumps, the deeper cypress trees is what I'm thinking. So, let's see. Albert Smith, what's going on with the fish lately? I don't know if I should tell you, Albert. So they're scattered. Your last week, remember we talked a little bit about it. Is I think they were spawning and they just got really, really scattered. On Heath, the same thing yesterday. They were there. They were scattered. The water quality wasn't great. The thermocline was at 8 feet. The bass were stuck about 7 feet, it seemed like. and they were suspended up in the fish attractors, and you had to throw something past them and they would grab it on the way down. So it was pretty tough. So when I did see some that up against stumps that I thought may have been spawning or garden fry, but it was hard to tell. They were both males that I caught that were doing that. So let's see. Birds View, Washington. Holy cow, Moose. That's awesome, man. I lived in Oregon, Salem, Oregon, back in 95, 100,000 years ago. Dawn from Tampa, Florida. Welcome. I'm trying to find questions. I went way back up, so let me find. I got the Caddo Lake one. All right, here we go. Just talked about that, Tristan. Tristan asked about the fishing at Rocky. You need to make a trip, dude. Book a trip with me. Seriously. Right now, it's only $300 a day. And what I'm doing is I'm doing what's called the guinea pig discount because I'm still trying to learn and I'm trying to get better and better at it. So I think $300 is a fair price for me, not feeling too comfortable guiding people out of a kayak, but I'm getting better. So, and I'm working on getting a client's boat rigged up. So, let's see. Have you seen Sea-Doo's version of the fishing jet ski? I have. I saw a picture of it last year. Yeah, that was pretty cool. There was a guy years ago. He used to take his jet ski out and striper fish on Clark's Hill. Thought he was crazy, but man, he was hauling in some big ones. So let's see. Never been to Beaver Lake, Arkansas. John Goss, Gina, have a tourney tomorrow and a windy cold front is forecasted. They've been warming 5 days. It was 90 today. Tomorrow, cloudy 60s with 25 mile per hour gusts, no rain. How will this affect the bass? So if it was warm, I don't know what your water temperature is, John. So what that wind will do is it'll stir up the water. If the water temperature was in the high 70s, getting into the 80s, those bass are going to start to go a little bit deeper, find that better, good quality water, and so what I would look for is I'd find some windy banks or windy points or something that the wind's blowing across, and it'll stir up that water. It also stir up the bait fish, but it gives that water a little bit extra oxygen. It'll concentrate those bass. If there's grass, they're going to be in the grass. I mean, this time of the year, if you got good green grass, they're going to be there. So moving baits, of course, because you got windy conditions. I wouldn't worry too much about the cold front. That usually doesn't affect bass for the first 24 hours. Usually the following day is when you really see an effect on whether they open their mouth or not. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Do farm pond bass react to changing condition, temperatures, wind, water? Yes. A bass is a bass is a bass, no matter what puddle of water he's in. They're gonna change. They don't like change, and they're gonna, they'll adjust and move, and they won't stay the same. They won't stay in the same mood and that kind of stuff. So definitely, they adjust. They just can't go very far, so they're a little bit easier for people to find them when they're in small ponds. Mercer Plumbing. Fished a new lake, very small, early in the morning on a shaded bank and caught about 10 bass and a couple of giants. That's awesome. Went back the next morning, same time, same conditions, and couldn't buy a bite. True, 100%. Fish have these little things. They're called fins, and all they got to do is this, and they're gone. And so a lot of times, if they were there, then the food was there, and I bet you money the food moved. Whatever they were feeding on or what they wanted to feed on had moved. And so that would be my guess. But also, if you're fishing shaded banks, it may have, I don't know what where you guys are in the spawn, but it may have been guarding males up guarding fry, or it could have been anything. So Jekyll Productions, my almost paste tomatoes are huge. Good evening. That's awesome. Mine are big too. Let me talk. Well, no, I'm not going to talk too much about gardening, but next year, I used the plastic mulch and I put the shiny side up because I thought that my temperatures were going to get real hot real fast, and I didn't want the soil to get too hot. Well, the problem is my tomatoes think that the sun is coming from the bottom, so they're turning their leaves over to get sun. It's the weirdest thing. So anyway, oh goodness. Casper says, Fluke, thank you for introducing me to Ned Bombs by Missile Baits. Clear water killer for me. Yes, they are. They are really good. I love the Ned Bombs. Crazy White Boy says, great to watch you on the big screen. Anyways, could you give me some advice for a sit on top tournament kayak without spending $1,500 just for a kayak, fish finders, etc., out of the price? Whew. There are some good kayaks at $1,000, and they're probably a little more than that now because of the economy and cost of plastics gone up. But goodness, is it the RS 117 that Bonafide has? I think so. It's either the RS 117. It's their $1,000 sit on top. Is a really good. It's a good paddling boat. It's a good tournament boat. It's a good basic $1,000 boat. If you're looking for a tournament rig that's you're going to put a lot of money into of electronics and put a lot of tackle on, you don't want to get an inexpensive one that's got a lot of tip and you want a good stable boat, mainly just to save your gear, And so Crescent makes some good ones at $1,000. Bonafide, of course. Get a used one. Look for a used one about $1,000, and then go take a look at it before you spend any money on it. So, Cape Cod's in full spawn right now. I am not surprised. Goodness. Let's see. Let me look. Connections for trolling motors, not a sexy topic. Two different connections. For the plug, I use the Marenco plug. And for, I love the Anderson plugs. And rumor has it they're coming out with a waterproof one or a marine style plug for the Anderson plugs. I really love those. And those are my main ones anyway. And if Anderson would make one that would fit 14 gauge wire, it'd be great. So, do you fish Guntersville much? Any tips? So much grass. I do fish it quite a bit, Dylan. It's only an hour and 20 minutes for me. Right now, outside grass lines and inside grass lines, you can flip them. You can parallel them with a spinner bait or a swim bait or something moving, swim jig, whatever. They're also working their way out. They're going to be, by the end of the month, they'll be on those outside humps out in the middle of the lake. They'll be out of the creek channels, move up on those humps, and then you can I tear them up with a swim jig. Is one of my favorite things to fish. So, but yeah, they're in transition right now, working their way out of the creeks. Oh, Sergio, he says, hey, for some reason I'm thinking of fishing a chatterbait in June. Good idea or not? Yes. I fish one all year long. I fish one in the wintertime. I mean, it just doesn't matter. I fish it all the time. So chatterbait's really good. One of my biggest things that I hype about and talk about is if you're fishing a lake with no grass, of course, stay away from wood because a chatterbait gets hung up in the wood really, really easy. But, fish those hard bottom points and those hard bottom humps, but slow roll it. Have it where it's just barely off the bottom, and it's a feel thing. It's something you really have to work on. But you want it to be down there on the bottom, bumping the bottom and kicking up a little bit of silt on those hard bottoms, and you'll catch fish for sure. And in grass, of course, you just get in the grass, and I look for the grass that's real patchy, and I throw it around and through all that grass. So, let's see. In your opinion, how shallow is live scope still useful? It just all depends on let me think on how you interpret it. I can use it as shallow as probably 4 feet, 3 feet sometimes, depending on the slope of the land. If there's not something in the way, usually you're looking really shallow. You get a little hump in it in the bottom, and it blocks off, of course, the rest of it. So, but to be safe, like 4 feet for sure. And then you can turn it to perspective and you can usually see pretty good shallow. Just I can't remember. I think it was like 40 feet out or something like that when it's really super shallow. So let's see. Have you done much with BFS gear? Thoughts? No, that's on my list to do this next week. I got a BFS reel. It's not a 13 reel, so I don't think I'll talk too much about brands because I'm under contract with 13. I mean, everybody knows that. But you know, and I got a medium rod for it. I want to see if I like that medium rod. I think I'm gonna throw a Cinco on it, as much as I hate to throw a Cinco. But the reason I hate to throw a Cinco is because I do it on a spinning rod, and I'm not accurate with a spinning rod, and a spinning rod takes too long between casts. You know, you reel it in, you have to flip the bail, you and throw it, and it just takes too long. And a bait caster is just so much faster, a lot more efficient. So that's why I'm so excited about it. Is just the efficiency rate of fishing light tackle is going to be pretty good. So I'm gonna play around with it, see what happens. The Cordova 2011. Sorry. He says, I always hear don't leave fish to find fish. With that being said, how long would you fish that area before making a move? As soon as I lose confidence in an area, in a bait, in anything. And that's a skill you really have to work on, is being able to identify that I've lost confidence. Why the heck am I beating a dead horse? Let's go. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. Let's try something new. Let's whatever. So that's one of the key things that I worked on for years and years and years and gotten better and better and better at. And I've gotten to the point now where, you know, even on a tough day, I can still catch a fish or a couple of fish. But it's the biggest thing is being able to recognize that you don't have confidence in what you're doing. So, hey, everybody do me a favor and hit the thumbs up. I just looked over there and saw that I only have 12 people hitting the thumbs up, and I got 128 people on here. Good grief. Do farm pond bass? Oh, I already got that one. All right. Atwood connector versus what? Gene and why? Help before I drill into my bona fide. So if you're hooking up an XIT trolling motor or any trolling motor, I would recommend, and even Motor Guide recommends the Marenco. It's a three-prong plug, mainly because what we're doing with our trolling motors is different than what bass boat guys do. Our trolling motors are our main source of propulsion. So we pump it up on high and we go for miles, you know, a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, however far. And so we're running a lot of electricity through those wires and through those connectors more than bass boat guys. And so I personally run 6-gauge wire through my boat. And I know that the XI3, the wiring inside the XI3 is all 10 gauge. And it does get warm during that period of time, but I've never had too much of an issue with it. Every once in a while I do, but it's negligent. You know, well, it doesn't make any difference. But those Marenco plugs are key, because the regular Atwood plugs, not only do they wear out because we plug them and unplug them and plug them and unplug them all the time, but they just get overheated because they're 10-gauge wire. Even the 8-gauge ones get overheated. So that's what I would do. And then make sure that you put your 60-amp fuse close to your battery and not up front away from your battery. So definitely. Anyway, that's what I would do. Ever been in a P127, a bona fide P127? If so, is it worth the extra $1,400 over the SS127? So personally, I can't pedal a kayak. I have a torn labrum thanks to the United States Army in my left hip. And so that egg beater pedaling type stuff, I'm good for about 400 yards. And then I feel it. And then I'm like, oh crap. And if I fish for several hours pedaling like that, I'm down and out for 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, getting it to where it's not inflamed anymore. So I don't pedal much. I love my 127 with the XI3 troll motor on it. And that's what I fish at all the time. Matter of fact, my P127 that they gave me due to my contract last year, I think I used it twice. Or no, I used it once. Jordan used it once. It's in my barn, and I'm going to take it down to Westbrook Supply and let him sell it for me under consignment here in the next couple of weeks. So just taking up room. I'll never use it just because of my hip. So, but it was a good boat when I pedaled it. I just can't pedal. It sucks. So what are your thoughts on buzzbaits? So my outline, let me move my outline, the number one bait on my June baits outline that I haven't had a chance to shoot it yet is buzzbaits. I love buzzbaits from now through the whole summer and into the fall. I'll throw them early in the morning. If I'm in a lake that has grass like Guntersville and stuff, I may throw it all day, no matter if it's sunny or not. Throw it over top of grass patches, throw it up in the bank. Just depends on where the fish are. But I love a buzzbait for sure. But so how many of you guys are from Northern Alabama? The reason I say that is my wife has talked me into, matter of fact, I think she's forcing me to, but tomorrow morning, if you've ever been to Collinsville, Alabama, they have a huge flea market. We've got a booth at the flea market, and I'm selling a bunch of tackle that I'm just never going to use. Some kayak parts, some old black packs. Good gosh, a whole bunch of stuff. A kayak, I'm selling there'll be a RS 117 there, a Bonafide, and a bunch of stuff. I got a whole trailer full of stuff we're going to sell at Collinsville. So we'll be there all day anyway. All right, so let's see. Indiana Sportsman. I've been fishing a few reservoirs here in Indiana lately since I got me a new kayak. Trouble is I'm struggling real bad on finding these fish in the bigger bodies of water. Indiana. All right. So I'll give you the basics. The first thing is you got to understand is a bass is not going to get far from its dinner table. So it's not going to be too far from the bait. So one of the things I do, especially this time of the year, as it's starting to warm up, as I go out in a little bit deeper water and or even when I'm going from place to place, I keep an eye on the balls of bait fish, and I want to see what depth that they're holding in. And so like yesterday during my guide trip, they were all in 7 to 8 feet of water. I mean, every ball of bait fish we went over was in 7 to 8 feet of water. And so I was talking to my client, and I was like, look, Keith, we got to go find things that are in that 7 to 8 foot range. And so we went and we found brush piles that even if the top of the brush piles or the top of the rocks or top of whatever were at that depth, there was going to be a bass there. Whether we could get it to bite or not was a different story. And a lot of times in those brush piles, the crappie had moved in and just pushed the bass out. And a lot of times they'll do that. You get so many crappie that they just force the bass out of that brush pile and he has to go somewhere else. So find the bait, find the depth of the bait, then go find things that the bass are going to hide in at that depth to ambush the bait as it swims by. So, let's see. Jason Lowry, he says, pros to getting a kayak with a trolling motor or a pedal. I want one, but then again, I'm not sure if I want to spend the money on one. May just get one and a paddle. I'm gonna say paddle. It's not an oar, it's a paddle. But anyway, and be happy. Dude, if you don't have the money, I would suggest don't spend the money. My dad was a cheap son of a gun, and he taught me how to be a cheap son of a gun. The XI3 with a spot lock is an absolute. It will change the way you fish. You can take that kayak, you can hit the spot lock, and wind's blowing. You can sit right there and make as many casts as you want to make. But if you can't afford a trolling motor with spot lock, get an anchor. And don't be afraid to drop that anchor 150, 200 times a day, wherever you want to fish. Drop it, keep you still, make your cast, bring it back up. Get an anchor wizard so you can do it easily. I did that for a long time until I got that trolling motor. So that's definitely what I would do. But don't spend the money you don't have. And I would never be one to tell you to do it. So, but that XI3 is it's a game changer. It really does. It changes the way you fish. Do I use the Bass Forecast app? Every once in a while. I have it on my phone. I don't use it a lot because I'm a fan of keeping my line wet. And so I think I can catch a fish all day long. I do pay attention to the salooner tables and the feeding times and stuff like that, just to double check. But yeah, and there is something to it. You're going to catch more fish during those feeding times than you will outside. But I like fishing the whole day, so, and I don't like to find excuses as to why I can't catch fish. 60 or 70 amp, okay. I use 60 amp for my trolling motors. So dude, Todd, I would love to go catch some of those Swanee bass down in Florida. That would be a lot of fun. We're not going to do it while it's hot, but I definitely would love to do it for sure. Especially now that I have those rivers, those RVR 119s. That'd be a lot of fun to fish out of them. Let's see. Vance Hicks said, last week's show I mentioned that I got my first bait caster. It was a struggle, and I no longer have a hope of getting into heaven, but I figured out the backlash and caught my first bass today. I'm using that line, dude. No longer have a hope of getting into heaven. I love it because I usually just say I'm losing my religion. But that's awesome, man. Congratulations on your first bass, and keep practicing, man. Definitely. You'll get better and better every single day. I love it. What time and place would you throw a wake bait? I personally love to throw wake baits. One, in shallow rivers, especially the rivers down in middle Georgia. But two is just over top of submerged grass, and you've got submerged grass and you got potholes in those submerged grass. And I love to throw even a glide bait that is a shallow glide bait. But yeah, wake bait is awesome for that. We used to tear bass up on Clark's Hill on a wake bait during the blueback spawn. But I know there's not a whole lot of lakes that are blueback herring lakes. So Ace Camper, thanks for the $5, man. He says, lost an 8 to 10 pounder yesterday. Whew. Took my 5-inch soft swim bait and a 4-aught hook. He said, hook set felt good. Would a bigger hook or bait have made the difference? I don't. Did you get your bait back, or did it break off? A lot of times you just don't know. I lose a lot of fish because they'll get something in their mouth and they'll clamp down so hard, and especially like a chatterbait, but they'll clamp down so hard you can't get a hook set in them, and they'll come up and open their mouth and it'll spit right out. And that's typically, at least that's what I blame it on, is losing them that way. So that sucks though, man. I hate losing big ones for sure. Let's see. Let's see. Wyatt, he says, been watching since the old fluke videos. Any experiences on the Tennessee River chain around Kentucky when the water is 70? They're getting out on the ledges. Promise you, they're getting out on the ledges, especially on Pickwick and Wilson and Wheeler. Kentucky Lake, when I fished it this last spring or this last fall in the national championship, I lost my mind. That lake has gone to crap, and I hate to say that, because back in the day when I used to fish it, man, it was fun, man. But it's just with the carp and the lack of grass and stuff, it's tough. But they get out on those ledges and they start playing around. So that's where I would look, at least, and on the long points too. Jason Lowry, man, I can't catch anything on a chatterbait for the life of me. No matter what the time of year is. Never get a bite on my Z-Man black and blue. Go to a white one. Get yourself a 3/8 ounce white, black and blue jackhammer, or white jackhammer, not a black and blue one. And slow roll that sucker over a long point, or anything that's rough bottom, that's hard bottom, where the bait fish are present and stuff like that, and see what happens. What you want to do is you want to let it sink down to the bottom. And once it hits the bottom, you want to pull your line tight, make 3 or 4 turns, and then stop and let it fall on a tight line. And what you just did is you got your line from having a bow from it falling to having it straight, and you're able to keep it deeper, easier once your line is straight. And then you just slowly start reeling until you just barely feel that blade. And every once in a while, just slow down a little bit to get that bait to get back on the bottom. And what you want to do is you want to keep it about that far off the bottom, as far as you can back to your boat. And just kicking up that silt like that, a bass will see it and they'll come down and they'll either hammer it or they'll come behind it and grab it, and you'll lose slack in your line, and you got to set the hook hard and fast. So try that. Let's see. How do you pre-plan kayak fishing on big lakes since you're limited in covering a lot of water? How do you pre-plan kayak fishing on big lakes since you're limited in covering a lot of water? I do a lot of computer research, and then I also take what I know about seasonal patterns, and a lot of times I'll call people I know that have fished the lake and say, what's the water temperature, what's the clarity, and that kind of stuff. I just want the basics, and then I just go. And when I get to the lake, I want to have about 3 days of pre-fishing. The first day, my goal is to hit every boat ramp that I possibly can. So I'll go to a boat ramp, put the kayak in the water, fish as much of the area as I can, put it back on the trailer, go to another boat ramp, and I'm going to do that until I find an area I'm comfortable with, and then I just stick to that area and try to figure it out from there. So Rattlestrap's late. He says, "Hey Gene, first, I'm sorry I'm late. Second, for muddy water, should I throw June bug or green pumpkin? Green pumpkin orange? I always try, if it's muddy water, the darker the color, the better. Green pumpkin does work. My rule of thumb is if the water's clear, I want to be using a bait that's either natural color, so green pumpkin, or I want to be using a bait that when I hold it up to the light, I can see the light through the bait. So translucent bait like a watermelon or something like that. And if it's muddy, I don't want to see the sunlight through it. I want it to cast a shadow. I want it to have a silhouette. I want the bass to get the best look they possibly can. And so I'm going to start with a black and blue or a black colored something. I might even throw a chartreuse something. Most of my moving baits are chartreuse, but I will throw a black and blue chatterbait and a heartbeat. So Landon Patterson said he just got the new Fate Black. Man, I've got a whole set of them that I use all the time. I love my Fate Blacks. So Collinsville, Alabama sounds like a great Saturday morning. Man, that is a huge, huge flea market. So if you guys are just joining me, I'm going to have a booth tomorrow at the Collinsville Flea Market in Collinsville, Alabama. I've got a ton of unused tackle that I'm selling for dirt cheap. Bunch of 13 plastics, bunch of Strike King stuff, kayak stuff. I mean, you name it. And a bunch of Plano boxes too. So buzzbait skirts or no skirts from Thomas. I usually rip the skirts off and use a grub or a toad, a horny toad or something like that. Gene, when are you going to do a video on live scope? Because it's a long story, but the Motor Guide, Rely on Batteries, and Lowrance are all owned by the same company called Brunswick. And I signed a contract with Brunswick. I've had one for the Motor Guide for years. But so I'm waiting on all my Lowrances to come in. You'll see Lowrances on my boat. And then I'm going to start doing the way I want to do my videos is pretty cool. I don't want to mention how I'm going to do it. But anyway, you're going to love them. And I'm going to talk about the basics, and I'm going to keep it basic, but I'm going to try to do as much as I can to help as many people as I can know what they're looking at on their fish finder. That's my goal. So, but I love my Garmins. I really do. So, Damien, he says, I have a public pond and the weeds are horrible all around. What can I use to not get caught up all the time and get the fish to notice my lure? So you want to get stuff that stays out of getting into the weeds. So you want light baits. I like what's called a split shot rig, or I call it a mojo rig. I like a Cinco, a weightless Cinco. I'll use a big worm, Texas rigged, with about a 6 or an 1/8 ounce weight in the front of it. And the goal is to just kind of work it like a Texas rig through the grass. But it's so light, it just lays on top of the grass. It doesn't fall down into it. And then when you get to a hole in the grass, you let it fall into the hole and that kind of stuff. So you just don't want to get it lost in the grass. You know, unless you find out that the bass are under that grass, then you want to be punching into it. Most of the time, I'm just going to take something light and bring it across it. So an orange chatterbait has been killer for you. That's what Matt Dillon says. The orange chatterbait has been killer for me. Huh. I don't throw an orange one much. Have I tried the slobber knocker? Yes, I have. Okay, so where a slobber knocker shines like the brightest light, dude. I love a slobber knocker in thick cover. So through rocks, through lily pads, through brush piles, through everything, it does not get hung up. And it's because of the shape of that head. It keeps it from rolling over. So when I'm fishing heavy cover, I have a slobber knocker on. Now, with that said, I haven't caught a whole lot of fish on one. Not like I do a chatterbait, but this year I haven't caught a lot of fish on a chatterbait either. But I've been throwing a slobber knocker for 8 months now, 7 or 8 months now. And I've only caught like 4 or 5 fish on it. And you know, and that's not from trying, but I'm just saying it's really good through cover and it will get bit. I just haven't had a whole lot of chance doing it. So, let's see. Any opinions on the affordable Pelican angler kayaks? I'm going to get into kayak fishing on a budget, and that's what I'm looking at now. If that's all you can afford, get it. Okay. But just understand that you're not going to get a very stable boat. It's not going to be a very durable boat. It'll last you a couple of years, maybe, or may only last you a year. But if you want to figure out whether you like kayak fishing or not, and you don't have somebody that already has a Pelican angler that you can go out and test it and decide whether you really want it or not, get what you can afford. Get a good paddle, get a comfortable PFD. Do not go fishing without your life jacket on. Just don't. If you're just new into kayak fishing and stuff like that, there's so many things that can go wrong, especially with an inexpensive, not very stable boat. Always wear your PFD no matter what. And then go watch that video on how to get back in your kayak that I filmed last year once you fall out, because it happens. So I've fallen out twice and I have a very stable kayak. Let's see. Oh, William Dean, you just had to say that. If you were fishing on Weiss tomorrow, what would you do? Not go fishing on Weiss. No. What I want to do over the next couple of weeks is I want to start fishing creek channel edges, like drops on creek channels. And what I'm going to do, and this is something you can do on Weiss, is pick a creek channel. And as you're going towards that creek channel, pay attention to the depth of the bait fish, and then go where the drop in that creek channel is at the depth that those bait fish are at. You may have to go all the way back in the back of that creek to find it. If the fish are at 8 feet, you're going to have to find where that creek channel is at 8 feet deep. And I just want to scan it and fish the creek channel edges and see what happens. They should be there. They really should. Or be on a stump or something that's on that drop or on that creek channel. So that's kind of what I want to do. And Weiss wouldn't be a bad lake to try that in. It's got a lot of stumps and stuff like that, but the stumps are only so good if they're on the right kind of structure offshore. So, have I fished the Mobile Bay marshes much? If so, any tips? I have not. I usually go to Louisiana and fish the marshes in Louisiana. I don't typically stop in Mobile. So, are my charters all booked for the year? No, dude, I only have one other charter booked. I really need to start promoting it across all of my social media instead of just right here. I got to get the ball rolling with that. But dude, I had one yesterday and it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I almost had him his personal best. Almost. I think he had it on. I really do. I think one of the fish he caught towards the end of the day, it was a giant, and he broke it off twice. So, favorite size weight for a Texas rig, 3/8 is usually where I start. And then I'll go to a 1/2 ounce. I literally only have 2 size weights for this time of the year, unless I'm fishing grass, but it's 3/8 or 1/2 ounce. Same thing with my chatterbaits, 3/8 or 1/2 ounce, or my swim jigs, same thing. So, let's see. When you get to a certain area, do you go through all your setups or only throw a couple before deciding to keep moving? It depends on the conditions. It depends on, what I'm fishing, what cover, or what the structure looks like, exactly what am I fishing. There are certain things I'll throw into a brush pile, like a jig or a Texas rig. There's certain things I'll throw into a rock pile, like a chatterbait or a crankbait, or I'll swim a jig through a rock pile, but I'm not going to let something fall into those rocks. Same thing with riprap. I'm going to throw a crankbait or a spinnerbait through or parallel that riprap. It just depends on what I'm throwing at. What is the most efficient bait or technique to fish what I'm throwing at right there at that point in time? And so I try to have 5 or 6 rods rigged up. And I've got a video that I've been trying to find time to edit that talks about, what 5 rods actions and powers and stuff I have on the boat all the time. So, what's your thoughts on flipping big worms in a shallow cover or just in the shallows? I don't typically like flipping big worms. Like when I say big worms, 11, 10, 11, 12 inches, I don't particularly like flipping them. If I'm going to flip something, I like to keep it 7 inches or even a creature bait, something with a lot of kick in its tail and stuff like that. I just don't flip a lot of big worms. And I think it's because a lot of times they get stuck on the way down, and that thing's the only worm that I'll flip is like a cutter worm, a rage cutter worm, or what do they call them? A speed worm from Zoom, something that's got a tail that kicks at the end. So let's see. Does the transducer need to be parallel with the bottom of my kayak? There's a recess under my Old Town Sportsman, but the transducer won't go entirely in. If it's a side scan transducer, yeah, you really need it to be parallel with the bottom of the boat. If it's just your standard transducer that you're just using the down scan, down imaging, and the regular sonar, then you should be okay with a little bit of an angle. And another thing I would do is go on the Old Town Facebook page and ask some of the guys what their fix is for that, because I promise you, you're not the only one that's had that issue. So I would go on their Facebook page and ask some of those guys. Some of the guys that are on there all the time are some really good dudes and some amazing anglers. And so I'm sure that they have a solution for you. Any suggestions on fishing during windy conditions when you don't have a pedal drive? Get an anchor. I use as heavy as a 10-pound anchor if I need to, but get an anchor on a good rope and run it off the front of your boat, so you can fish into the wind. And if it's really windy, you got to let some line out, so you have, you got your anchor, you got your line coming at an angle, and then your boat. So your anchor's way up front, way up here. And the further apart you are from your anchor, the more it's going to hold. So if you drop it straight down and you find that you're moving, let some more line out and let you get a little bit of angle on it, and it will stop. So, David Hutter says, my daughter wants to know if you have ever fished for sharks and if you ever got one. Yes and yes. So I did a video years ago with Black Tip H before he got famous. And we fished off the beach for shark, and I caught a tiger shark. and it was a lot of fun. I got the video. It's deep buried in my videos, but it's there. So yeah, I have. And then when I was in the Army, I used to fish for like little baby hammerheads in Pearl Harbor when I was stationed in Hawaii. So that was a lot of fun. We'd just go to the grocery store and buy some shrimp, put it on a hook, and throw it out there and catch as many little baby hammerhead sharks as we wanted to. So, have you ever used the new scat or poop looking baits? I have. Matter of fact, I just looked at them today, digging through my drawers, and I've got a whole bunch of them. And they work great. They really do. That's just not my kind of fishing regularly. It's one of those things that I wish I had them sometimes when the bass, like yesterday when the bass were suspended in the top of brush piles. I wish I had one in my boat and I would have thrown it on a hook and let it slowly sink down. So, what's a good trailer for a swim jig in the grass? I like 2 different trailers. I'll use a paddle tail, like a little small 3-inch or 3 1/4 inch Rage swimmer, or I'll take a Rage Menace and I'll rip one of the legs off of it, or one of the claws off of it, and turn it this way so the hook's running. I'll turn it to where it's swimming this way instead of this way. So you got a little bit of a kick from just one of those tails. I explain it in my swim jig video that I filmed several years ago. But yeah, dude, those are the 2 trailers I use probably most of the time, no matter what. But they work really good in the grass. How do you find a creek channel without a fish finder? With a Carolina rig, with a 1/2 ounce Carolina rig, and learn what it feels like when your bait's falling and that kind of stuff. I did that for years and years when I was fishing out of a belly boat and I was fishing out of a John boat and didn't have a fish finder. I drug a jig and a Carolina rig around everywhere, and I learned what it felt like when it was falling, and I learned what it felt like when it wasn't. So when I was coming uphill. So another thing is a map. If you can find a good lake map of your lake. I know that's hard to do on small lakes. So, oh, Stephen, don't tell me that. So Stephen Valenti says Louisiana redfish and speckled trout fishing, some of the great fishing is some of the greatest in the country. I 1000% agree with you. I love to fish for trout and redfish in Louisiana out of a kayak and out of a boat, but it's just something about paddling a kayak around, standing up and sight fishing for redfish. I just love it. It is so much fun. So I'm probably going to go. I need to go this October. Summer is usually pretty tough because they're usually way, way, way out, and it's just hard to get to them. But definitely need to do it this fall. Something I've been working. Rattlestrap says something I've been wondering. Everyone knows the weight of lures. How do you figure the added weight of a trailer? Soft plastic could go over the rated weight of the rod. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So where I've gotten to, and where most guys are, is on your back cast. If that bait feels really weird on your back cast compared to what you're normally used to, you can feel that heaviness, and you're like, and it's a little bit harder to get accurate. Then you're probably throwing too heavy of a bait. So, and I throw, 8 ounce bull shads on big heavy rods and that kind of stuff. But when you're throwing something, for instance, I throw a, what do they call it? A KVD 8.0, the big, huge square bill. I throw that on my jig rod, because every other rod that I have is a heavy jig rod I'm throwing a crankbait on. Every other rod I have, when it's on my back cast, it just feels like I'm getting overloaded on that back cast. And you'll know what I'm talking about when that happens to you. But definitely. Let's see. Are you going to have any spinning rods for sale? Yes, I've got a boatload of rods, dude. I bet I've got, I don't even want to say it. I bet I got 50, 60 rods that I'm selling tomorrow at Collinsville. So yeah, and definitely all kinds of different brands and stuff. There's going to be great deals. I just need to reduce the amount of crap that's stored in my barn is what I'm doing. And 15 years of doing this, I've collected a lot of stuff. So Brian Brokaw says my personal best is 15 pounds, 5 ounces. Holy cow. In Orlando, Florida in 2002, took to a Publix in a bag. 3 bass fishermen knew what that bag meant and followed me to the deli. Uh, waited up and about fainted. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Oh goodness. Dang, that's a big fish. 15.5. I've seen a 16 pounder, and a 15.5 is huge. Let's see. Do you have any Nico tips from LG Fishing? Nico rig. The biggest tip, see, what I had an issue when I first learned how to fish a Nico rig was feeling the bite. And I figured out, the one thing is you want to be able to keep it to where that bait is not laying on the bottom. You want it to be bouncing on the bottom, nose down. And so the way you do that is, and you'll get used to it after a little bit of practice, is you want to have your rod up a little bit high. So at like 10 o'clock, not 9 o'clock, you want it up at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, but you want to keep the line coming off the rod tip at about a 90-degree angle. And you just want to barely lift it. Like you're only lifting your rod about this far. And you just imagine yourself hopping that thing on the bottom. And you'll know when it hits the bottom, your line will want to go slack. And you want to keep your line, even as it goes slack, sit there for a second, but you don't want to drop your rod to a flat slack line. And just and pop it and pop it and pop it, and then pause it and pop it and pop it and pause it. It's all a feel thing. You'll know what after a little while of practicing, what it feels like when that bait touches the bottom, and then you just pop it, or you can let it sit on the bottom and shake your rod really, really lightly. But I usually just am hopping mine. So Diego Herrera, he says, I'm your son's friend in Memphis. That's awesome, man. Give him my love. So, and a lot of these guys know Jordan. So Jordan, my son, you guys know him. He's on his mission trip, and he's in Memphis, Tennessee right now. And Diego's one of the friends that he's made. That's awesome, man. So cool. What was my MOS? I was a 91 Bravo, 91 Papa. So I was a medic. I had to go through medic school and pass medic school in order to get into X-ray tech school. So I went through a field medic school, and then I went up to X-ray tech school. I was in training for 54 weeks, so over a year. What trailer do you prefer on a chatterbait? The Yamamoto Seiko, the Z-Man. It's the trailer I can't remember what they call it, but it's the trailer that they use for blade baits. It's got a flat tail on it. Those are the two I use the most anyway. So what kayak do you run? I run a Bonafide SS127 that is rigged out to no end. It's ridiculous, but I got everything on my kayak that a bass boat has. But yeah, I love a Bonafide. It's a great platform to be able to customize everything. I love it. How far down deep do you set your motor guide on the 127? It depends. If I'm running it high and it starts to gurgle, you hear that the blade just kicking up air, I usually will drop it an inch, and then that's the highest I'll use it. When I'm in super shallow water, or I'm running up through grass and stuff like that, I'll pull it up as high as I can and still get it to spin good. And even if I hear the gurgle, I don't mind. But typically it's down. It's hard to say. It's probably 1.5 fists down is what my average depth is. But I move it around a lot depending on what I'm doing. So Elizabeth said that's a razor shad. That's right. Any recommendations for a good budget spinning rod? My Daiwa is finally coming apart after 3 years and about 60 plus big fish. I got pushed into catfishing duty and handled a bunch of big 44-pound cat channels. Oh, wow. Gosh, I don't fish a lot of spinning rods. And so I feel like I'd be pulling stuff out of my butt if I tried to suggest what I've used. The new spinning reels from 13 are great, and they're $150, I think. And so I love them. I mean, they're really, really good. The new ones, even the lower budget ones, are pretty good. So look at the 13s from the $60 range up, and that'll be a good spinning reel. Rod, that's all personal preference as far as I'm concerned. So I stripped out one of my very first spinning reels. I snagged a 45-pound grass carp on accident, and it destroyed that spinning reel years when I was a teenager. I'll never forget that. And the rod went from being a medium heavy to a medium light. It was a fiberglass rod anyway. So, what's the best fluorocarbon line for the buck? Seagar, the Basics 101, $10 a spool. It is great line for $10. It is not great line for $25, but for a $10 spool, I think it's the best line on the market for sure. What I always tell people, dude, if you're on a budget, it's good line. It's not going to have issues. You're not going to have shock break issues and that kind of stuff. And it's just a really good line, but it doesn't perform on the like a spinning reel and stuff like a $30 spool or something like that, because it's the cost of it. Fluorocarbon resin is really expensive. So for them to be able to figure out how to make a really good fluorocarbon for $10 a spool is incredible. So let's see. Does your motor guide cause turbulence on your sonar? Yes, but it's always super shallow and it really doesn't bother me. I don't get a whole lot deeper. And it may be how I have my transducer set up. I have it set up to where it's an inch below the bottom of my boat, or an inch and a half below the bottom of my boat. So what rod do you recommend for a chatterbait? Now I am going to pimp a 13 rod here. Because 13 has a rod called the chatter crank rod, or at least they used to call it the chatter crank rod. Now it's just a medium heavy moderate 7'4", and it's in 3 different models. I think 2 or 3 different models that 13 is got a casting rod that's a 7'4" medium heavy moderate, and that is the chatterbait rod. Love that thing, and I have 3 on the boat any given day, because I also use it as a spinnerbait rod or a crankbait, a square bill rod or a buzzbait rod. So what do I think of the Yamacraw? The pictures I've seen look great, dude. Hey, that's a picture of me in your avatar. That's awesome, man. But yeah, I haven't fished it, but the pictures look pretty cool. It'd be something I'm just gonna have to go buy. I have to wait for Country Sportsman to get it before I go pick it up. So, what bait do you use when suspended bass won't bite? Whoo! What bait would I use is a Cinco, a wacky rig Cinco, and y'all know I hate to fish one. Another thing is a jerk bait, a fluke, a weightless fluke, and then if I've got suspended bass. Okay, so let me explain something real quick. It's going to be one of my last questions that I answer, but there's a couple more I want to touch on too. But anyway, so if you get out and you see a drop, okay, so bass will get out on a flat during the mornings or overnight, and they'll feed out on a shallow flat or shallow point. And then when the sun gets up and hits the water, they move out and they get to the edge of a drop. And when they're inactive, a lot of times they go out and they suspend. So here's your drop. They suspend out here at the level of that drop, but they're going to be 10, 20 feet or even yards off of that drop. And you can see them on your fish finder. And they'll be suspended out there over deep water and just hanging out and chilling. And they're like, they're still, they know exactly where they are. They have a great sense of direction. And then when it's time to feed, they'll move and they'll come up to that drop and they'll feed right there on that hard edge of that drop. And they'll go cruising up and down and stuff like that. And they'll feed. Well, what I like to do, if I see them suspended out here, I'll grab a crankbait or a jerkbait and I'll get up here shallow, throw out past them and bring that crankbait and make 30, 40, 50 casts and see if I can draw that fish or the school of fish to that drop. And what's funny is once you get them to that drop, if they follow in your bait and they're following your bait, once you get them to that drop, 70% of the time you can get them to bite. And that's a pro tip. That's something that I learned by reading what Kevin Van Dam did, like in Bassmaster magazine years and years ago. That is what really good crankbait fishermen do to fire up a school, is to get them to where they feed. So bring them from being suspended to that brush pile or to that drop. So, and Thomas, I answered your question. His question was, when do you throw a crankbait? So that, and when I throw a crankbait around rocks a lot too. And when it's windy, if it's slick calm, I don't typically do any of that. I usually don't throw a crankbait around. So, let's see. So you shop tackle at Country Sportsman? Yes, I do. That's the best tackle store in the state of Georgia. I'm going to do a video for them here in the next couple of weeks. For sure. Best tackle shop in the state of Georgia is Country Sportsman here in Rome. All right. Got that one. All right. Last question from Grayson's Georgia Outdoors. He says, what is my confidence bait? There's a lot of baits I always have confidence in. And they change throughout the year depending on seasonal patterns, on conditions and stuff like that. But something I always have a chatterbait tied on. I always have a jig tied on, whether it be a football jig or a flipping jig or something. And then for finesse, I always have a shaky head or a Ned rig tied on. So I have confidence in those baits that are always there with me, especially a shaky head or a Ned rig when it's tough. Shaky head when I'm fishing brush piles and stuff that get hung up in, and a Ned rig when there's not a whole lot to get hung up in. So definitely. So like I said, you guys that are in northern Alabama or in the Alabama area, come tomorrow to Collinsville. My wife and my family and I will be there. We'll have a booth. I got a 16-foot trailer out there full of tackle and kayak. I got a kayak I'm selling. I've got tons of fishing equipment, tons of rods, reels, all kinds of stuff I'm selling for dirt cheap just to get them out of my barn. And yeah, come to Collinsville. We'll have a booth out there. And my truck, I think they're going to let me park my truck behind my booth, so you'll be able to find it easy. But anyway, that's Collinsville. And that's it. Well, like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water, go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. We'll see you.